Welcome everybody to today's workshop on the 7 steps to writing successful grant applications. Now, I just want to congratulate everybody by saying, firstly, thank you for joining me today and making this your priority for this morning. And this is a great skill to learn for any business, and we'll make a start. So before we do, just some general housekeeping. Be great to have you on mute and just so that everyone can listen. This webinar will be recorded, which will be sent to you tomorrow as well. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please write any questions in the chat, starting with a Q, and my wonderful PA, Deb, who's on the call as well, will collate those for me to answer later on. And also you will receive a couple of emails after this webinar, the recording, and there'll also be a feedback form. So if you can just be checking your junk and spam folders, as sometimes they do pop into there. So let's make a start. So who here is a small business owner? Put your hands up. Yep, I've got a couple, right. And who is already too busy? Few smiles and a few hands up there too, yes. And who wears all the hats in their business already? Yep, everybody. Normally that's the case. And what I've found is small business owners are often not ready or don't know what is required for those grant applications. The grant programs also always seem to have a short application period, and I've seen some lately with as little as 4 weeks. Now that's not a great deal of time. So we all know in small business, resources and time are already scarce and limited, and we're already wearing all those hats in the business. I'm Liz, the Efficiency Coach. Essentially, I'm a business coach and grant writer for small business. What I'm obsessed with is making sure that your business has the best opportunity to be successful. You know how there's never enough time to write that grant application in the time given, and it's something just never gets done as it just seems way too stressful. Well, what I do is help you and your business to be ready when that grant program is released, and you'll have the right tools and information at your fingertips so that you can present your business in the best possible way. Now, I love writing grant applications. I've got extensive experience managing grant programs in a couple of government agencies here in Victoria and Australia. And since having my own business, I've worked with more than 50 clients on their grant applications with an 85% success rate. And this is also due to the fact that I'm pretty upfront about how strong your project or idea is for each grant program. So I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. So we'll always have that quick 15-minute chat at the start of the engagement to really analyze your project against the criteria of the grant that you're wanting to apply for. Now, this is the start of my 7 steps to writing successful grant applications. This is a process that I've developed and used myself with my clients. And my guarantee to you is at the end of today's workshop, you'll have 7 clear steps to follow when writing grant applications. Now, the first step is all about being successful. We don't want to do stuff that isn't successful or is going to waste our time. But what does success mean to you and your business? It means different things to different people. But when it comes to grants, we all want that approval of those grants. So the first step is to get all the information, read that criteria of that grant program, and then at the same time, draft your outline. And normally this preparation at the start, reading the criteria is really important. I've had one client last year who they didn't read the criteria properly and they actually weren't eligible. So, you know, that saved them a lot of time if they had proceeded with that application and not quite read the criteria. Sometimes the criteria and eligibility can be quite confusing, and it does also pay to sometimes contact the grant program contact so that you can get clear information about whether you are eligible or not. Now, planning your work plan. This is where I start with a numbered checklist of all the components required. Why do I have it numbered? So that you can allocate those tasks across different people in your organization or community group. And it allows it to be scheduled in a way that's chronological and in order. Now, it's really important to bring your team together and have a kickoff meeting right at the start, and also engage a grant writer. Now, this doesn't have to be me, but I do recommend that you have someone that's had some experience in writing successful grants, because there is a bit of an art to it. So make sure that you're working with someone that knows the process, knows the ins and outs of the grants, and also of your business to help you along the way. But planning is key here. Now, this is what I do. I create and design our own project plan and treat the grant writing application process as our own project, a project within a project, you could say. So this is outlining how is a project going to happen, what needs to be done, and how you're going to allocate those tasks and actions across your team. And also, the big thing that's really important is what costs are involved and what does your budget look like. So this is always the most important thing, because at the end of the day, you're asking for money. Your grant is normally giving money. So the organisation, the funders need to know what you're going to be spending that money on, how that's going to impact, and what's involved in that. Now, this step here needs to be really, really detailed, because this is what you'll keep going back to. If you've only got 4 weeks between the grant opening and the grant closing, you've got to be really tight. And there's also, as you'll see, there's a lot of components to the grant writing that are relying on other people. So you need to make sure that you're also that you are keeping on track, and also it's a good way to share this with your team to know where you're at. Now, step 4, collating all those supporting documents. Now, this is one area that I find a lot of people skip over. And having worked on grant programs for government, knowing how important these are when these are being approved and the grants are being assessed. So this is, again, looking at the criteria, looking at that eligibility, and then also looking at the application form. So what is required for each of those grant applications? So I'm working with a client at the moment. We've had our initial meeting. We've assessed that, yes, they have a strong project to apply for this grant. We've gone through the eligibility criteria line by line and ticked it all off and make sure that we've met all that criteria. We've also looked at what is required in that grant application form and all the questions and answers they need to collate as a starting point for us to write that grant application. Now, writing the letters of support, this is another thing that people seem to skip over. Letters of support are from other agencies, other businesses that you're working with, collaborators, and other people that are going to benefit from your project. So this is where it's really important to create those relationships and have those to call on at a time of need to quickly say, hey, can you write me a letter of support? And what we often do is I'll draft that letter of support with the key components of the project, the key benefits of the project, and then they can add their little extra wee bit in for themselves, pop it on their letterhead, they sign it and return to you. So we're making it easy for them to help you out as well, rather than saying, hey, John, can you write me a big long letter? And they'll be like, well, I haven't got time for that. We're all busy. So this is where it's really helpful to make it as easy as possible. Now, getting the quotes, this can be a really lengthy process because, again, everyone's really busy. And this is where you need to be really clear about what you are asking for in your project. Your quotes are going to substantiate what you're applying for. So they do need to be detailed, they do need to be proper, and they do need to be from real suppliers. So again, that relationship building. And this is where it's all in the preparedness and readiness for grants. If you've got a project that you want to run in your business and you're hoping for a grant, go in and get the quotes now. See what it is going to cost you and what's involved in it. And you might have to get more than one quote as well. And if you're on a really tight deadline, some people are going to take ages to get a quote. And for some applications, if you haven't got the quote and it's required, you can't submit your application. And that's happened a couple of times for people that have, come to me on their second or third grant application and said, we ran out of time, we didn't get this in because of the quote. So that's where it comes back to the planning, allocating those tasks, and there are some external suppliers within that, and then giving them a call and making sure that they do it in the follow-up. Now, some grants, especially in Victoria here, if they're more than $50,000, you normally need financial reports. Lucky for you, I'm a chartered accountant, so I can sign off on those financial reports if you have zero. And also sometimes we need to develop a cash flow statement to accompany our grant application as well. So that's another thing that's really important, or you can go to your accountant and get it from them. Now, what's GSD? Get shit done. This is the step where you've definitely just got to knuckle down, collate all the stuff, and then work together to write that application. So this step 4 is the bulky part of the application, but if you know your business and you're all ready to go, then it should be plain sailing. Step 5, now this is where we actually start writing the draft application. So I don't start writing it at the start, I wait till we've collated all that. So when I work with clients, I'll say, you go off and do your project plan, you go off and get your designs, you go off and get your quotes. And me being a numbers person, the quotes are what I actually start from, because then I can see all the componentry in the quotes, and then that's where I base my answers off as well. So writing that draft application, so you would have already had a key outline, you've already got a bit of a project plan, you've already got an idea of what you're already what your project is for your business and what the benefits are and who it needs to benefit. But this is where we go back to addressing that key criteria. So sometimes there'll be outcomes that the fund has to meet. So there will be some questions on that. And then there'll be some other questions about who you are as an organisation, why this is needed, and why you guys are the best to do it as well. Now, check this assessment weightings as well, because I've just seen one recently where 40% of the weightings was actually based on the business, of who was and the suppliers and who was going to be conducting the project. So that's really important. So this is where you need your bios, you need your past experience, your past skills, what your future goals are for your business, and all that kind of stuff ready to go. Now, this one here, checking the word limit and the character limit, is really important, especially if you are drafting your application in a Word document first. It's really easy to check the word limit. Then when you copy and paste it into the application form, sometimes it'll cut it off. So if it's 1,000 character limits and you've tried to copy and paste 1,050, it'll just cut off the last 50 characters and you don't even know. So I always, when I do my templates, make sure that I include those word limits or character limits. And also that gives me an idea of how much I'm writing. So I've seen application programs that are asking for an executive summary with 100 words. And then I've seen other ones that are asking you for 1,000 words. And when it comes to word and character limits, I always encourage people to absolutely maximize. So be concise, but use those word limits as much as you can, because remember, at the end of the day, these people don't know your business. All they are looking at is your application of what you've written. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And you may even have to repeat yourself in the different questions to make sure that they're getting to the crux of what your project is and what you're trying to achieve in this application. So this is obviously one of the most important steps once you've got all your information, is how you write it. Because if you can't write it, then you're not going to have an application. I've seen some applications where they've been really brief. They've written 2 sentences because they've said refer above. But we don't know who's going to be assessing these applications. So there might be different people assessing different parts of it, and different questions and different review stages. So that's why it is good to repeat it and just pretend that, well, they don't, not even pretending, they don't know anything about your business. So you need to tell them. Oh, what's going on here? Step 6. Now, this is actually my favorite part of writing grant applications, and it's really bringing together your business, your project, and your why and your story. So this is kind of the fun part of it. We're writing what we need to write, and now we're making sure, basically we're proofreading it and adding in the juicy bits to make sure that we're writing in a persuasive way, and basically convincing that assessor that your project is the best with the most impact and the best outcomes for whoever it's supposed to benefit. And making sure that you are including the benefits to the targeted audience. And again, it comes back to that criteria. What is this fund for? Why are they giving the money out? Who are the organization that's giving the money out? Are they going to see your project favorably? Is it in the right area? All those little things might seem really simple, but I've heard of people applying for grants where they're not even located in that particular area. And you've just wasted your time. So making sure your why and your story is added in, and again, linking back to the criteria and writing in a way that you're absolutely selling yourself. You're selling you and your business to make sure that people fully understand, and you've left nothing stone unturned. You've detailed this project as much as possible, and also referring to the documents that you're attaching to the application as well. So sometimes you're allowed to attach photos or plans or pictures, and making sure you refer to them in the answers as well. Because again, if they don't see them, the reference, and they'll go, oh, we need to look at that as well. So that is the second to last step. And then really this is the final step. And this is really important to make sure that you review. So when I work with clients, I'll write their application for them in a Word document. I'll send it to them. They'll come back with any feedback, making sure that I've got everything right, that I haven't called something the wrong thing. And if I'm writing a grant application, I also get someone else to read it as well. Making sure that it makes sense, that does it logically flow, the things that we're trying to add in are added in, and making sure even your grammar and all that sort of stuff as well. And then if there's an application form to submit it into, I'll then copy and paste it into that. And then I normally pass it back to the client for them to do the final check of everything, and then they press submit. Now, pressing submit's nervous for, even I get really nervous, and I hope that I've, have submitted everything and included everything, and I'm making sure I'm not doing that at midnight. And that's another thing as well. If an application closes at midnight tomorrow night, for example, I would have hoped that we'd aimed to submit it yesterday or today. Normally they review on a first in first basis, and obviously grants are a competitive process, and some will just assess till they get to the allocated funds, and then anything after that, sorry, you've missed out, have to wait till next round. Normally you don't get any feedback. Normally you either get an approved, here's a grant agreement, or sorry, see you later, no feedback, no opportunity to for feedback. And they'll always say, oh, we had so many applications, and you just never know. So that's my wee tip as well. And this comes back to the project plan, where we actually work towards that 2-day deadline, 2 days previous. So we're not up to the wire. I had one client who I was working with on a mentoring basis, and they went to submit it 10 minutes before it was due on the cutoff, and their computer crashed. And they had a hell of a time trying to get that submitted, and luckily they were able to, but we just want to avoid that stress. And for 2 days, and this is where it is, again, really important, that if you've only got 4 weeks, and then you need to start at the very start, and then you also need, you are losing 2 days, but it's there if you need to. If, for example, the quotes haven't come in or something hasn't been quite finalized, obviously, if it's submitted before the closing time, that's absolutely fine. But in an ideal world, we do want to aim for 1 to 2 days previous, and not be at 11:58 when it closes at 11:59 p.m. And the most important thing here is celebrating what you've just achieved. Now, I always say to people, writing grant applications is actually a complete investment in your business, because there'll be things that you have to answer that you've never thought about, that you've never created. And the way I write my grant applications is that you could then use that wording on your website, for your collateral, on your social media as well. So there's multi-purposes for when you are writing grant applications. And of course, when it comes to writing the next grant application, pull out the last one we did and start from there. So you're not starting from scratch. The first one's always the hardest one. And that's why the celebration step is really important. And then you do just have to wait. Some grant funders will tell you when they're going to announce the decisions, and some won't let you know. So you do just have to, it is a bit of a waiting game. But that's why that celebration is important, because you've finished it, you've submitted it, there's nothing more you can do. It's a bit like an exam. You walk out, you've done your best, you put your heart and soul into it, and it's out of your hands. So let's not worry about it, and let's move on to the next thing, or that next grant application, or the next thing in your business. So this is the this was my 7 steps to writing successful grant applications, and this is the process that I follow with my clients. So it's all in the preparation, reading through that criteria multiple times, and even reading through it at different times of the day. So reading through it, having a go at it, coming back to it the next day, and with a fresh mind, and then putting your plan in place. Who's going to be involved? Who do you need to work with? And then creating and designing that plan, collating all the information, writing it, adding your why and your persuasive writing to make it the best, reviewing, and then submitting it. So if you can pop into the chat, what was your biggest takeaway from what I've just shown you today? Was there something you didn't know, something that you needed to be reminded of, or something that was completely new to you? And if you have any questions, please also write them in the chat with the capital Q as well. I'll just give you a few moments to do that for me. Cool. So yes, collating that information, and the letters of support is the one thing that a lot of people forget about, even though it'll be in there. And sometimes people don't know what that means either. So it's important to include that into your application. So we've got a few questions that have already come through earlier that I'll just go through now. The number one question that everyone always asks me when I'm introduced as the grants lady, where do I find grants for my business? Now, I'm in Victoria, Australia, so I've picked some that are Victorian-wide and Australian-wide as well. I use the Grants Hub. Some of these you do have to pay a subscription for, but sometimes it's worth that investment. It might be a couple $100 a year, but again, the payoff, knowing that the grant is there, being able to subscribe to their emails makes it much easier. Business Victoria will have all the state government ones listed. Business Australia will have all federal ones and state government ones listed as well. And then Grant Guru and Grants Ready are 2 other basically directories, and they basically just bring them all in together as well. You also might know of grants that have come up in the past and know to keep an eye on them for coming up again. That is the biggest problem with grants. We don't know if they're going to be coming out every year. We don't know when they're going to come out, so you need to be ready for when they do pop out. Another question is, are there grants to help me start a business? Now, generally the answer is no. Generally, if grants are there, they're normally for established businesses, or they're for new businesses that have started in the last 1 to 2 years, but they won't be for anything initial for startup. They might be for your marketing or business coaching, but they won't be to start a business from scratch. So I always say to people, you need to start a business on your own, and you need to invest your own funds in there, because why else is someone going to invest in you through a grant if you haven't given that time and resource to yourself? So my little tip on that for starting a business, you need at least $5,000 of cash to start a business, and in a lot of cases a lot more. But if you haven't got $5,000, then you need to save up until you've got that. That's just my personal view. It makes it a bit easier. And how are grants assessed? Now, this is basically up to any grant funder. They can set the criteria. Some of them will let you know what their criteria is through the weightings, and some of it's more detailed than others. So it's about being able to answer the questions, knowing what to do, and knowing what words to put in there, and the buzzwords. I always say to people, pick out some of the key words that they've used in their, their guidance, and putting that into your application, and sort of, rhetorically answering back to them what they're asking you to do. But normally they're assessed on a first basis. There will be normally a panel that will review, and there'll be, depending on the program, it'll be different stages. So you might get, if you've met all the criteria, you might get through the next stage, and then they'll whittle down. Again, it depends on how much funding they have, whether it's oversubscribed, whether everyone's going to get it. So yeah, there's a whole different combination, but normally you can get that information from the guidelines and the criteria to work out, to have a bit of an idea of how it's going to be assessed. And it'll also depend on whether you're applying for a $5,000 grant or a $500,000 grant as well. There'll be different processes to go through. And if it is more of a lengthy process, an assessment process, that will also be outlined by the grant funder as well. So here's some businesses that I've helped with their grant applications over the years, which is kind of exciting. I do love helping businesses and seeing them get the grants, and then also helping them with executing those projects as well, and seeing their business grow from these grants that they've received. Sorry, I've just missed that question, June. Is there an expiry date on the quotes? Yes, some of them will outline that the quotes have to be within a 3-month period. And that's why I always say to people, you need to, in the planning stage, if you've got your project and you know who you want to go and get that quote now. And get it all, and then when the grant comes out, you can just ring them up and say, hey, can you just redo that quote and change the date? Normally, I think they specify that it's got to be within the last 3 months normally. So yeah, but if you've already got a quote, it's much easier to ring them up and say, can you just change the date? And then they're more obliged to do that than, oh, I've got to do a whole new quote. Everyone hates doing quotes, but obviously we do need to do them from grants. So it's about preparing for that and being going into being in advance and having those relationships. This is what it all comes down to, because if you're letting the supplier know that you're applying for a grant, they're going to be excited too, because if you get that grant, that means they're going to get some work as well. So it is a win-win situation, but it is a really tricky one to navigate and get people to do within the timeline. So here's some testimonials from a couple of my clients. Adam and Yulia are creatives and have a wedding venue, and they've got some great grand ideas, but trying to get them, keeping them down to the straight and narrow, and keeping them on track. And their project actually kept on building and building as we went through the process, but that meant more quotes and all that sort of stuff as well. So there was a lot of work involved in that one, and we're still waiting for the assessment. Chris applied for his cool room for his farm shop. So that was a bit of a simpler one. And once I got the quote, it was pretty easy to write that application, and he was successful. So that's meant he's more efficient and looking much more professional with the proper cool room in his farm shop. Ben and Jessie, clients of mine, this grant application actually took them from a side hustle to their full-time business. So they pivoted and completely got fitted out with a trailer for their tailored tool marking, and without that grant it would have taken them years and years. So that's really exciting to see that they were successful with that one. So if you want to work with me on grant writing, I've booked out some time in my diary over the next couple of days and next week to book a 15-minute call with me to discuss your business and your readiness for grants and where you're up to. And Deb will be putting that Acuity link into the chat now. And I'll also email this to you later as well. But that's the best way we can have a chat. Grants come down to where your business is at, what you're needing. And some businesses want grants, but they don't have a project, you know, so no one's going to give you money just for having a go. You know, there's got to be outcomes, there's got to be benefits and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, if you want to, you know, it's free 15-minute call. We can just, you know, and it might be that you're not ready now, but when a grant does come up, we can then have another chat and work out what a plan is for going forward. And I've also created a exclusive Facebook group for my clients called the Efficient Business Community. And this is where I will be posting, as well as on my normal page, but you'll get priority in this exclusive group of any grants that are applicable to my clients, and also sharing with you my efficiency tips of running a business. So I'm running a business too, and so we can all share from each other. And so if you want to join this group, you can click on that QR code there, or Deb will also put that link in the chat as well, or you can just search the Efficient Business Community in the Facebook groups function, and there's a couple of questions to answer there, and we'll see you in there. So that is pretty cool. That link is on there as well. So click on both of those to be part of that. Now, I really love this quote. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And this is what grants are all about. We don't want to run our business waiting for grants or relying on grants. They are a bit of a bonus. But if you're prepared and ready to go and a grant comes out, then that's your opportunity to pounce. The other thing, I've worked with businesses to go through their project plans, and some businesses have decided, actually, this is way more affordable than I thought. They've actually gone ahead with their projects and not even needed a grant or not waited. You know, when you do get a grant, sometimes you feel like you're at the mercy of that funder. You might be have time constraints, or it might not work for you, or there might be matching requirements or whatever it might be. So it is in the preparation and the readiness to be press go when you need to. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that useful and that you have learned something, and that you can take something away from my 7 steps to writing successful grant applications. If you do want to get in touch, head to my website, call me, or you can email me, and I'm also on Facebook and Insta as well. So thank you so much, and I will see you all soon.